so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life? Well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to take a moment to tell you about a few sponsors that not only help to make it possible to produce this show 5 days a week, but that I'm also genuinely passionate about promoting, especially since they're helping to fund all the cool projects we have in the works, such as the Positive Head app, the docuseries that I'm intending to begin shooting within the next year, and whatever else we dream up over here at Positive Headquarters to help spread consciousness across the planet. Now, if you're short on time or just super excited for today's topic and want to dive right in and skip these ads, feel free to fast forward about
4 minutes
to get right into today's show. That being said, I strongly encourage you to listen because the reason I'm passionate about my sponsors is because they've made a huge impact in my own life, which is why I've aligned with these organizations. And I firmly believe they can do the same for you too. The first longtime stellar supporter of the show that I want to mention is Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online with over 8,000 video titles. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. The second sponsor I'm extremely passionate about promoting is Purium. It's no mystery that bringing your mind, body, and spirit into balance is necessary if a person truly intends to manifest the greatest and greatest version of themselves. And as of recording this, it's been about 4 months since I started taking the Purium Core 4 superfood products every day. And I can honestly and sincerely say my mind, body, and spirit have never felt more in alignment. If you've been looking for a way to easily get superfoods into your system every day with a simple plan that can help you reestablish a healthier foundation and relationship with food, I cannot recommend for you to start with the Purium 40-Day Ultimate Nutrition Plan, which includes a 10-day metabolic reset and cleanse enough. I spent personally months researching Purium before I jumped in, and now myself and over 150 other positive heads have started with the 40-Day Ultimate Nutrition Plan, and many of us have continued taking the Core 4 products on an ongoing basis daily ever since. I personally intend to take them for the rest of my life because they played a huge role transforming my vibrational state. If you decide to do it, it'll cost you just over $7 a day for the first 40 days and only about $5 a day after. But if you do it the way that I recommend you to do it, the smartest and most beneficial way, it won't cost you anything. I recommend you to just look at where you can reallocate money you are already spending on food each day. Essentially, you're just going to swap out the unhealthiest stuff you're in the habit of purchasing in exchange for Purium superfoods. And this way, it costs you nothing to participate in the transformation and cleanse. And it creates exponential benefit because now you've replaced something that lowers your vibration with something that is going to make you feel super high in the healthiest kind of way. Just take a few minutes, see where you can cut out $5 to $7 a day and commit to doing it. It's that simple. Also, for support, we'll be doing a big group transformation with other positive heads and soul family once each month for support. So I recommend, going right now, ordering your 40-day Ultimate Nutrition Plan bundle so that you have it when the next group transformation starts. Procrastination is not your friend. Order it now. You can thank me later, because I can assure you, you will not be sorry you've decided to send a message to the universe that you're ready to step up your vibrational game and reclaim your health sovereignty. Just head over to ishoppurium.com. That's spelled ISHOPPURIUM.com. Be sure to use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, for either $50 off or a 25% discount, whichever is greater. And also, if you want to learn more details about the Purium products, why I'm so passionate about promoting them beforehand, you can go check out several videos I shot discussing these things in greater detail. You can also hear my interview with the very inspiring founder, David Sandoval. Much, much more over at positivehead.com/transformation. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's Pow Wow episode, I'm very excited to have the one and only Charles Eisenstein here with me on the show. Well, precluding any alternate timeline versions of him, of course, who I had the pleasure of spending some quality time with down in Costa Rica last winter. And for those that don't know, Charles is an acclaimed thought leader and author of several fascinating books, such as The Ascent of Humanity, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, Sacred Economics, and most recently, Climate, A New Story. And today I'm super excited to dive into his brilliant brain and expansive heart to explore some of his perspectives on shifting the collective consciousness so that we might move into the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. Hey there, Charles. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Brandon. Good to talk to you.
Yeah. It was really great to get a few minutes to sit down with you at the Superhero Academy, at Envision Festival last year. And, we were both part of that experience. I had an amazing time. And, I look forward. Are you planning to go back to it this year? Do you know?
I don't think I'm going to go to Envision. I think I have to be somewhere else at that time.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was quite the experience. Definitely, you got to be comfortable with getting sweaty and dirty, but definitely a really, really good time. So I like to start with the same predictable question and end with the same predictable question. And here's my starting question. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I would probably say, what made you curious about that?
Okay. All right. I've never had that as a response. You look like an interesting guy, Charles.
Yeah. I used to have a ready answer to that, which is my passion is to contribute to the change in our story. The story of the people, the story of the self, the story of the world. Because our whole society is built on a story. And if we change that story, everything else changes. But, I've become recently aware that the story is just one layer of a much larger being that is in the process of change. And that whenever I state what my passion is or what I serve, I feel like I'm never quite doing it justice, because what I serve and what we all serve is so huge and mysterious that I don't think that we really even have the words and concepts to put it into at this point in our evolution. Like, any way that we describe it is going to be smaller than what it is.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. It's like words are really just taking a stab in the dark at putting, somehow trying to define the indefinable, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, great. Wonderful. I love that. Well, nonetheless, we are going to go down the path of using these feeble words to understand the ultimate nature of reality and, how we can, help shift the collective consciousness and change that story to create more of what we want to see in the world. And I think it would be really great to give the listeners and myself a little insight into your story and what led you up to this point in time in your travels, in your earthly journeys. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to just maybe hear a little background and what led you here.
Well, I was born in the late 60s and had a sense that there was something, you could say something wrong in the world, or that what I'd been offered as normal was actually not normal, that it's not supposed to be this way. I had that feeling in school, sitting at those desks, doing those worksheets, and it's a beautiful day outside, and the teacher's yelling at us to keep quiet and not move around, and we have to ask permission to go to the bathroom, and these endless rows of long division problems, and the state capitals, and Vasco da Gama and Ferdinand Magellan, and all this mythology that we were learning.
Right.
And there was a deep part of me that thought, this can't be it. This can't be right. And that gloried in rebellion and was happy if there was a smoke alarm or a snow day or something like that. This feeling of wanting to get out of this cage. So and so many children have that experience, which is not validated by the people that they are biologically programmed to trust the most, which would be their parents and the other adults in their sphere. Like we look to these people to tell us what the world is supposed to be, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. And all of these authority figures are saying, no, this is right because you have to get good grades, and you have to telling me that a good boy will participate in this, do well in this, do as he's told, and so on. So this created a powerful dissonance within my being that stayed with me for a very long time and drove me to excavate the source of the wrongness that I'd felt. And why is it that everyone is telling me that the world and the direction of civilization are worthy of my full participation? And I have to also say that I did have some allies that affirmed my felt sense of a incoherency in the world, because I was turned on at a young age by my father and some other influences to radical literature that said, something is really wrong here. And I know that this is called positive head. And here I am talking about a wrongness in the world. And maybe we're not supposed to dwell on that.
Acknowledging is seeing something so that you can understand where you want to put your attention and energy on in relation to it. I think makes a lot of sense. It's you're still in positive head domain. That
eventually what I came to was that the wrongness is itself part of a much larger process. An evolutionary process that doesn't discount it. Part of the process is to go through that stage where it feels like everything is completely wrong, that there's no hope, to be plunged into total despair and helplessness. That's part of a larger rightness. And if you bypass that with a spiritual ideology that says it's all good and everything is perfect and there's a perfect divine plan, even if that's metaphysically true, if it's used as a bypass from going through this necessary stage, then it's not true.
Right. I love that. Excellent. So Now, you ended up at Yale, so I'm assuming at some point you sort of decided to conform.
Well,
to some degree.
Yeah, I kind of half-heartedly went through the motions in high school and had enough. Like, I was always interested in mathematics, and I don't know, whatever. I ended up going to Yale. I ended up, participating enough in the system to get into Yale and studied mathematics.
I tried a little bit and I got into Yale. No biggie.
So what goes on is in our culture and in the school system, you are given psychological rewards for the expression of certain gifts. You're given grades, good grades, and affirmation, and everybody tells you you're smart, and everyone tells you you're good. And I was not entirely immune to those vibes. And so I have a certain set of gifts that fit into that program.
Yep.
And if my gift set had been to making plants grow, or perceiving human energy fields, or improvisational theater, then no one would have told me that I was smart. They would have pathologized me. They would have sent me to the psychiatrist if I was perceiving human energy fields. They would have sent me to the principal's office if I was improvisationally parodying the teacher. So I happened just by chance to have a certain set of gifts that funneled me into the elite preparation program called Ivy League education. So it's not that, I don't think it's that I, tried harder than anybody else. It's just, my destiny put me there.
Sure.
And so there I was, thinking, okay, if I study mathematics and philosophy, then I'll find the answers to my questions. What is the nature of reality? Why are things the way that they are? I thought that this would be the gateway to finally resolving this puzzlement that I'd carried. And I discovered the opposite, that these, especially in philosophy, that they were lost in their own conversation that drifted farther and farther from reality. And that's when I basically jumped ship. That's when I jumped off the success trajectory, and I left the country, lived for the next 9 years in Taiwan, and just pretty much left the matrix.
Wow, that's quite the jump from Yale to Taiwan. And what was your experience over there? What did you do? Well,
I had a series of experiences that confirmed my fragile intuition that I had been given a much smaller picture of reality than what was actually real. I went there being very much a rational materialist, believing that although philosophy and science and mathematics were not satisfying, that, they pretty much had the basic understanding of reality, like that we were on the right track toward formulating a theory of everything, that we meaning the dominant culture, the West, modern society, that we basically knew how the world works, what was real and what wasn't real. And when I went to Taiwan, I experienced things firsthand that my education and the story of the world, the story of separation, the story of that is embodied in physics, said were impossible. I experienced them firsthand, things that I would have ridiculed a few years before. So I'm like, okay, I guess what I thought was real is just a very sector of reality. And
Right.
what else have I been told is real that might not be real?
Right.
So I a phase of opening and inquiry that gave me the information that I needed to answer that question of what's the wrongness in the world. Like, that had been impossible. It's like in the movie The Matrix. Like, Neo cannot find the answer to his question, what is the Matrix, from within the Matrix.
Right.
Because no matter where he goes, he's still in the Matrix. It needs something from the outside to give him a vantage point where he can understand the Matrix. And that is what I received in Taiwan through traditional Chinese things, and also through psychedelics, and also through, well, there were some other influences that I could go into, but that the basic picture is that there was an intervention that punctured my reality bubble.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like psychedelics play that role. If I had a nickel for every time I heard from someone I took mushrooms, and my whole view of reality shifted, they just play, it seems, even an ever increasing role in, sort of that, puncturing the bubble, as you put it so eloquently. It's like, it's a fascinating thing to see how many more people now seem to be having that same type of an experience. Because even going back, all those years ago when you were having that experience, it was probably quite a bit less common than when you look around today. Like, we were at the Superhero Academy, and you're seeing people who's are in totally different bubbles. So yeah. It's a fascinating unveiling that sort of seems to be happening. And I haven't read any of your books. The last few years have been the least amount of reading I've done, producing the show 5 days a week, plus other entrepreneurial ventures. But I've heard from many close friends, how impactful they've been. And so I'd love to get a little download on sort of, okay, your reality bubble was punctured. You went on to write, several books that are acclaimed. And, one, I saw something online saying the great place to start is the more beautiful worlds our heart knows possible. So maybe you could start a little bit, telling us what all's in there.
Yeah. Let me say one more thing first about
sure.
psychedelics.
Yeah.
Which is, you're right that they are becoming more normalized. And I think what they do, or one of the functions that they serve, is that they erode our story from the inside. So today we live in a world that is built on the story of separation. And this is actually related to The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Possible, because in that book, I describe the transition from a story of separation to a story of interbeing. So we live among systems and institutions that are built on separation. For example, our political system. For example, our money system. A political system based on force, essentially.
Right.
That's what. Right. It comes down to, if you break the law or violate a contract or don't repay your loan, et cetera, at some point, an armed agent of the state is going to come and take something from you or lock you up. And the money system also, creating an experience of scarcity, competition, and a society of endless growth and consumption. Those qualities are built into the money system.
Right.
And we can also go through the educational system, the medical system, et cetera, the agricultural system, all about killing, dominating, controlling, pesticides, irrigation, pumping the water, et cetera. So we live in these systems that embody or reify the story of separation, but our consciousness is changing, and we no longer identify or feel at home in these systems. And this is actually a lot of what the book is about, identifying this alienation and why it's happening. It's simply because our story is dying, and the story told us how to live life and what's real and who we are. how to be a man, how to be a woman, what's important in life, and how to do marriage, how to do work. I mean, it gave us a set of meanings and values that just do not resonate anymore, and they don't even work when we try them. So
right,
yeah. So that, even if you don't take psychedelics, I mean, that's it in various ways. More and more people are being ejected from that old story and cast into a space between stories where you don't know anymore. The answers to these basic life questions, you just don't know. Who you are,
right?
What's real, what's possible, how change happens, how to be a man, how to be a woman. Like there's a vacuum that leaves people vulnerable to fascistic stories, to basically anything that comes along and says, "Oh, here's who you are, here's how it is, here's what the world is." We're vulnerable to that at this time, and so I think that when we're talking about shifting consciousness, one of the things that we can do is to offer a new story that affirms life and invites people into who they really want to become or who they can become.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's something that we talk about a lot on the show is, this idea, that we are all interconnected and the same, consciousness that animates my form is the same consciousness that animates your form, and separation is an illusion. And if you start playing with that idea, that story that, everywhere I go, I'm there waiting for myself. And living your life from that perspective, I always say to people, just explore that with an open mind and see for yourself. If you start, treating everyone as extensions of self. And and then telling this story that you are all connected, and I believe we are all the creator and created rolled into one, and source consciousness is everything, and you start living from that perspective and seeing it's such an empowering story to tell, and the results that it gets are what's most important. That's kind of my thing, is like, hey, just consider it with an open mind and see for yourself what telling that story does for you. And I think that's the ultimate sort of litmus test with, because there's so many stories we can be telling, right? Like you said, there's a vacuum here. And so you start telling a story that is super empowering, life affirming, this concept that you're an eternal being that's always been and always will be, and change is guaranteed, and we're floating in eternity. It's a very empowering one. It served me very, very well, and so that's sort of that's my story, and I'm sticking to it until I change it or expand upon it. Or
yeah. And then there's also the readiness to take on that story,
right?
Because a story, as I said at the beginning, is part of a much larger being. It's like the conceptual organ of that being. And so if you come to somebody with that story that we're, like you said, we're eternal beings, and change is inevitable and it's okay, et cetera, like, or the story of interbeing, that each of us is part of all of us, that every relationship that you have mirrors something in yourself, that anything that happens in the world happens to you, that any action has cosmic significance, like all of these threads of the story that I'm speaking of. If somebody is not in a place to, if the rest of their being is not aligned with that story, then it's just going to seem ridiculous. They're going to reject it. And rightly so, because the story of separation has its own developmental logic. And
I call it relative truths. It's like, from one perspective, you and I are one. From another perspective, you and I are separate, and so I have to agree fully with you. It's like if someone is rejecting that and their story is separation, and so it is, right? And that is their experience.
And maybe they need to fully live that, and until it ripens to the point where they're ready to molt and step into a new story.
Absolutely.
And so then the question becomes, for me, I mean, given the fact that the story of separation is killing the planet. The question for me becomes, okay, how do we serve this maturation? How do we serve this metamorphosis and this evolution? And it's not just by saying, hey, believe in this story, but it's also creating the data points that are part of the transformed state of being that allows somebody to even accept a new story.
Right.
And so some of these data points, so for example, the old story has a story of human nature that says everybody's in it for themselves. Everybody's seeking to maximize self-interest. All life is like that, seeking to survive and reproduce, to maximize reproductive self-interest. And we're all separate selves, and everybody's trying to get the best deal, and we're all in it for ourselves, and more for me is less for you. Like that is a belief system, but it's also a lived experience, especially in our current economic system. So anything that you do to provide a anomalous data point, a contradictory data point that doesn't fit into that story, that will be an invitation to somebody to step out of that story. So in other words, any act of generosity, any act of kindness, forgiveness, compassion, those are data points that say, maybe the world isn't the way you thought. Maybe maybe we're all in this together. Maybe our basic nature is to give, to love, to support each other. Like those data points, I think, speak a lot louder than words, and they prepare the ground for a shift in our story.
I love that. Yeah, that makes me think of something that I've really focused on in the recent year or so, especially, where when someone is doing something to me that is could be perceived, or would maybe typically be perceived as, not cool. This is not my friend. Their behavior definitely gives me the right to behave in response in a way that creates this sort of negative feedback loop, and we're not friends. We're not, whatever. I've really found a lot of joy in going above and beyond when, like, just being the bigger person, or trying to be not the bigger person, maybe that's the wrong word, my best self, regardless of how they're behaving, understanding, hey, someone's behavior is, first off, it's never personal. They're doing this because of where they're at in their own journey and story, in the story they're telling themselves. And how can I use this as an opportunity to show up and be who I choose to be, regardless of it. Sort of a proactive approach as opposed to reactive. Yeah. And it's been powerful for me.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what you're doing is yourself stepping into a different story. So you take somebody's attack, and instead of framing it as they're attacking me, there's something wrong with them, you ask, where is this attack coming from? What is it like to be that person? And how can I respond to these base conditions that are generating the attack? Like, what hurts in that person? What do they need? And by looking for that, then all kinds of options become available that are not available in the story of this bad person is attacking me.
Right. And especially when you start considering that this person is an extension of me, as we talked about a little bit ago, and this is a reflection in some way that is actually happening for me and not to me. And also through me, that story really serves this step well to be able to sort of muster the courage and the wherewithal to deal with someone who is, attacking or rejecting you, which, that's a big one for a lot of people, feeling rejection. And okay, how do I bring, love and acceptance to that and not take it personally?
Yes.
All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. So, speaking of, making the world a more beautiful place, and, this it kind of leads to your latest book. And, a big part of that is understanding the environment and the climate. And I'm really personally curious. Like I said, I haven't read the book, but and I don't claim to be someone who's done the research, hardcore research on climate change, to be quite honest. I've seen a lot of and heard, a lot of the normal things that we all have. But, I think of a good friend that I grew up with who doesn't believe climate change is real. And, and you hear that sort of argument still being made out there, and or that it's just this natural process. It has nothing to do with, humanity. Me looking at everything from sort of this sort of spiritual perspective, I guess you could say, where I can certainly see the healing that needs to happen on our planet, and it makes total sense that would be reflected in our environment in a way that is, we're impacting it negatively, so to speak, with that energy. So I'd love to get the download, or at least a glimpse of the download that you share in that book, and what your perspective is on the new climate story.
Yeah. So I think one way I look at it is that humanity is being given lessons almost in the curriculum of interbeing, which says that, in part, it says that what we do to the other, we are actually doing to ourselves. The first lesson in that curriculum was nuclear weapons, the threat of nuclear holocaust, which for the first time in history made total war no longer an option. Like, it became impossible to completely defeat your enemy through overwhelming force. War between the great powers has been essentially impossible since 1950. That is a huge change, where it necessitates a huge change in our thinking. I'm not sure if we've actually fully digested that lesson, but we're so geared or programmed to a solution mentality that involves find something to kill, find something to defeat, find the bad guy, and defeat the bad guy with force.
That's right.
That's what war is. And we can never, ever, we meaning like the United States, we will never, ever defeat by force China or Russia or any country with nuclear weapons. Like, that's no longer on the table. And it's not just in war, it's in everything, in medicine. Like, what's the pathogen? Kill it. In agriculture, what's the pest? Kill it. Foreign policy, crime, criminal justice. The problem is crime, find the criminal, lock up the criminal, deter the criminal. In none of these areas are we asking, what is the underlying cause? Like, why are people committing crimes? Why are people immigrating? Why are there weeds growing in this field? Could it be a deficiency in the soil? Could it be a improper relationship between ourselves and the rest of the life there? Like, what is this telling us? How is this part of ourselves? What is this showing about who we are and how we are relating to the other? That's not part of the find the enemy approach. So climate change, I think, is also a message to us that what we do to the Earth, we are doing in some way to ourselves. We cannot escape the consequences of our actions.
Right.
Now, I do have some sympathy with the climate skeptics because I think that especially the predictive science is not as sound as many people think, and I see that the real problem is ecosystem destruction that degrades the ability of the living being that we call Earth to maintain conditions for life. Yeah, so I see Earth, and this is really what the book is about: seeing Earth as alive, seeing the rainforests and the wetlands and the whales and the soil and so on as organs of a living being, organs and tissues. Understanding that if we continue to degrade these organs, Earth will no longer be able to maintain homeostasis, no longer will be able to maintain the conditions for life. Even if we cut carbon emissions to zero, if we destroy the rainforests and the wetlands and life on Earth, then the planet will continue to die. And whether or not you believe in global warming, like I think that the focus on is there global warming or isn't there and so on, that is way too narrow a conversation. Because whether or not you believe that that's happening, it is undeniable that the honeybees are dying everywhere. It is undeniable that there are maybe, I don't know, half the fish or less than there were when I was a kid. That there are 5 or 10% of the whales that there were a few hundred years ago. That insect biomass has declined by 75% over 30 years. And so on and so on and so on. Life is dying. And to divert the conversation onto, are temperatures higher now than they were during the medieval warm period?
Right.
Like, that's not the right conversation. I do think that greenhouse gases are dangerous because we have a weakened system already and we're adding another stressor. And the result could very well be runaway global warming, but it could also be intensifying fluctuations as the system spins out of control. And so one of the warnings in the book is let's not reduce the ecological conversation to a matter of global warming.
Right.
Let's make it about serving life on Earth. So by redirecting the conversation to life, to ecosystems, to the organs and tissues of this planet, we empower and validate healing actions that are invisible or less visible from a carbon-centric perspective. So if you are, say, dedicated to saving the sea turtles or saving the whales, it's hard to put a carbon number on the value of sea turtles. But when you understand that they are part of a web of life that is weakened when any member of it goes extinct, that revalidates that kind of work. Or what if you are working with prisoners on death row or the homeless or something like that, where it seems from like a save the world from greenhouse gases right now perspective, it seems like that's kind of a waste of time. If sea levels rise 50 feet, then we're not going to have to worry about homelessness or prisons anymore. Like everything will be gone, right? So this contradicts my heart's knowledge that each kind of healing contributes to all the other kinds of healing. That a society that exploits its most vulnerable members will also be a society that exploits the most vulnerable beings on Earth and the most vulnerable places. That the geological climate, the Earth climate, is intimately connected to the social climate and the psychic climate. In the global warming narrative, very often, if you ask, why should we save the rainforests? Or why should we save the whales? Or why should we do this? Why should we do that? Why should we cut? Why should we stop drilling? Why should we not build a pipeline? The answer is because it will generate X megatons of carbon dioxide emissions. So the value of the rainforest gets reduced to how much carbon it will sequester. And from that accounting mindset, why not cut it down and replace it and offset the lost carbon with a field of solar panels instead? Or cut down the forest here and plant another one there. The reduction of something to its instrumental utility, to its quantitative value, is part of the problem. That's the mindset that says that Earth exists for our benefit. And to say that we're just not being clever enough in exploiting Earth for our benefit and we need to do it in a carbon neutral way instead, that's not a big enough revolution. I think where climate change is pushing us is to rejoining the community of life on Earth and being in community and saying, we want to save the rainforest because we love the rainforest, not because of the X megatons of carbon that it's going to sequester. We want to save the whales because we love the whales. These are magnificent beings, not because who knows how much carbon. I mean, you have to look pretty carefully to see how whales contribute to a healthy atmosphere. They do. It's, they, for example, bring up nutrients from the deep ocean and allow life to thrive that ultimately feeds small organisms that excrete calcium carbonate and so on and so forth. Like, you could, if you really tried hard, make a case that whales are essential to a healthy atmosphere. But is that really why we should save the whales?
Right.
Like, why should I not just go out there and commit armed robbery and take all the money for myself? Is it and kill people? Is it because, well, that would be bad for me? Or is it because people are inherently sacred and worthy of life? So that is the transition that we're facing here, to embrace the rest of the world as sacred and worthy of life, and to ask, how can we participate in the flourishing of life? How can we serve the health, the evolution, and the dream of this planet? Why are we here? It's really asking, why are we here? And that question in the old story was essentially to become the lords and masters of nature, to increase our dominance until we could dictate down to the nano level the behavior of all matter in the universe. Like, that kind of was the story. And that is giving way to a story of co-creation, participation, community with all of life.
Yeah, that is so powerfully stated, and the way you explain it and the perspective is just awesome. And it really supports the story. For me, what comes up when you're talking about all of that is, it really supports the story that, I've been telling, that a lot of us have been telling, that, the separation is an illusion, and it's actual, not just physically is there consequences. It's like, if we are indeed, all the same consciousness, animating different forms, it's what I'm doing to these other beings, these living beings, trees and whales, and all of the life on Earth, I'm doing to an extension of self, and and therefore the energetic repercussions must be felt, because you're always doing it to yourself.
Right. And the repercussions, I like that you say the energetic repercussions, because it may not be that the consequence of destroying other life on Earth will be that we don't survive. The consequence could be that we do survive on our dead and ruined planet. That would even be worse, where we have bubble cities and VR simulations of all the lost nature, and digital adventures instead of real adventures, and carbon sucking machines to maintain the atmosphere, and hydroponics factories to grow food, and no more nature. Like that is a future that we are moving towards step by step. And every measurable indicator of human well-being could very well rise. We could have that alongside rising GDP, rising life expectancy, rising educational levels, and so on. But I think we're already seeing, and we have already seen that on Earth. But what we have not measured, or that we don't admit into these statistics, is a growing alienation and despair that does come up as, depression statistics and suicide statistics. But basically, when we are cut off from the rest of life, and when we extinguish the rest of life, something in ourselves dies also.
Right.
We might survive as separate selves, but I go out, I live right now temporarily right near the ocean, and when I go out there and I look at the seagulls and the other birds, the cormorants, and it's just when I really take the time to kind of sink into their reality. There's that seagull standing on that rock for like an hour, watching the waves. What kind of meditative trance is it in? It's not struggling to survive there. Like something is going on. Like, what is that? And then they're aware of me, and I'm aware of them, and my it's like I recover a lost part of my being that is unavailable to me when I'm indoors and on screens. And I think, like, just if I lost those seagulls, if we lost, as we are doing right now and continuing to do, but if we continue to lose all of our companions here, and we don't even know what we've lost, all we know is that we feel bereft, that we feel alien, that we feel alone. That scares me more than, in a way, it scares me more than human extinction. And where it takes me is, like, I will do anything it takes to serve a world in which there are still seagulls and seals and whales, and where life thrives, and I'm part of it. That's why I'm here.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, that there is not a nobler cause or more important and pressing, time-sensitive issue. I mean, in speaking to that, what is your sort of gauge? And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but how much time do you think we have to really like right the ship? And what do you obviously writing a book and getting this information out there is the most important thing, as important as anything that we can do. But what are some other solutions or ideas that you have to help, turn the ship around?
So that's interesting. I'll preface my answer to say that I think that our society is stuck not only in the wrong answers, but also in the wrong questions. The questions that we ask perpetuate the world that we live in, and we need to begin asking new questions. So, like, not to like pick on your question, but
no, please. If it gets us into a better place, you can tear it apart.
So like the question of how much time do we have? That would be like asking an alcoholic saying, "Okay, so you've convinced me that my drinking habit is going to destroy my family and cause all this harm. But so how much time do I have to stop drinking?"
Right. It's a silly question.
And the answer is none. The answer is it's already too late to reverse, to stop the damage that's already been done. Like nothing that we're going to do right now is going to bring back the Tasmanian wolf or the woolly mammoth, or the dodo, or any of the other animals that are going extinct, and the places that have been ruined. And the ruin is happening right now, and we can stop it now. And if we wait 5 years, if we say, well, we have 5 years to stop it, then that'll be 5 years more of ruin. So really, it is a question of choosing what we serve. And that choice is available to us all the time, every moment, and it's available right now. It's not like, okay, we have to get ready to make that choice, and how many years do we have to get ready? Mm-hmm. It's always available. Do we serve life, or do we serve something else?
Right.
And I don't want to that can be a recipe for failure, to say, well, you've just got to choose life, because it ignores the conditions of that choice. And I think that's important. What are the conditions of our choice collectively to more and more and more death? And what are the conditions of our choices individually that do not serve life as well? To make it just a matter of the will of a disembedded chooser, a separate self, that is also part of the story of separation. So what I like to do is to, for one thing, to ask, why are we choosing death? What is the trauma underneath that? Why are we unable to feel what nature is feeling? How has that disconnection happened? And in the book, I talk about there's the ideology of disconnection that says Earth is just a bunch of stuff. And then there's also the wounding, the trauma that blocks our capacity to feel. And the healing needs to happen on both levels. So so most people, myself included, there is that desire to serve life, that willingness. And there is a lot in the way of that exists also in my being, that is crying for healing. And I don't even know how to heal it. I am in need of healing. So what can I do right now? What can you do right now in this moment? At least you can give attention to your willingness to serve life, to acknowledge that part of yourself that is true. From that attention to the willingness, changes begin to happen. It is a call for healing to happen. Yeah, and you can also put attention on the hurting, on the wounds, on the discomfort, and that's real too. At least then you have a survey, a full complement of data of who I am. Here I am. Here's what I need. Here's my willingness. Here's my readiness. Help. That is a powerful stance. It's not up to us, but it is, in a way, it's a prayer. It's a declaration of willingness and an openness to receive the help that we need in order to be effective servants to a more beautiful world.
Last night I actually went to dinner with a friend and listener, and she is very much on a path of, helping to create sustainability on our planet. And it was the first time I was actually at a very, a vegan restaurant, Cafe Gratitude, and it's, pretty conscious all the way around. You order the food with, I don't know if you've ever been to a Cafe Gratitude, but you order the food as, whatever it's called. It's like abundant. The meal could be called abundance. And you say, I am abundance if you want to order it. And I am whatever. And so, very conscious place. And it was the first time she looked at, at the end, there were some leftovers and she's like, okay, I might take this to go, but I don't have my to go container that I didn't drive, she didn't drive, I did. And so she actually says, can I see your to go box? And I'm like, wow, that is a whole new level. I haven't seen anyone do that. And then she explained, well, a lot of these cardboard, boxes that are to go, they'll even be lined with plastic. And I made the decision that I've just, as of a few weeks ago, I'm just not going to support anything that is not sustainable at all. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. How's that working out at the grocery store? Or, and she went on to explain, well, I go to the farmer's market most of the time now, and I do get bulk foods at the grocery store and things like that, and bring my own bag. So, to me, that's sort of a little big thing, because it really does disrupt your normal flow and your convenience factor. But as she pointed out to me, she said, solutions arise because I've made the energetic choice to do this, and as a result, I'm starting to find ways around workarounds, right? And I think that was very powerful for me to hear her talk about how, and inspiring that she's doing that and living that reality.
Yeah. I think that small choices like that, even if there's part of the rational mind that says it's just a drop in the bucket and what does it matter compared to all the else that's going on, I do think that they are also a kind of a prayer that says, I'm serious about what I serve, and here's what I'm willing to sacrifice, and here's the actual 3D change that I'm willing to make. That it kind of shows whatever's listening to our prayers that you mean what you say. And also, I think that this orientation toward service of life, there's no formula for what is or is not in service. Like, there might be situations where, say you decide that you're not going to participate in the agricultural industrial complex, and you run into somebody and they offer you a cookie or something like that, and the situation is such that by accepting that cookie, you will spread love and goodwill. And if you reject it, they're going to feel judged. And like, you can think of a situation where you might want to take that cookie, or like more personally for me, like, I do a lot of flying on airplanes, which is really damaging to the environment. And how do I make that decision whether to fly or not? Am I going to try to calculate the net benefit versus the net cost and quantify everything? And, well, I'm going to be burning this much fuel and creating this much pollution. And so that's in the minus column, but in the plus column, the people I talk to, maybe 10% of them will adopt this change in their life. And let me add all that up, that's an idiotic way to make decisions. And that whole way of decision making originates in economic thinking, in accounting and costs and benefits. That's how you make an economic decision. You add it all up. And I think that that is also part of the old story that we need to, or that it is time to transcend. And that there is a guidance organ that we have called the heart that tells us what is or is not in service to life. And sometimes what the heart says goes against the mind's understanding of how the world works. It doesn't ignore the mind. Like, when I learn about say the dolphin deaths that result when tuna is processed or whatever, like that information feeds into my heart, and I might find my heart giving a different signal than it had before. So it's not about ignoring rational information, but it is about trusting the integrated knowledge of the heart rather than the analytic knowledge of the mind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You referenced and said your heart's knowledge earlier, and that jumped out at me because I think that is another thing that we are becoming more aware of. This idea that, hold on, the brain isn't the only place that wisdom springs from, right? And so it's I think that's a big part of the healing journey for us all, is moving out of the head so much and into the heart. Is a huge factor, I would say.
Yeah, and it's not like that we should discard the head. It's just that that it has its function, and the heart has its function, and the gut has its function, and maybe in the society that we grew up in, the head function has kind of overtaken everything else. Yeah.
Part of that programming of having you sit in the classroom on the beautiful day, staring out the window, doing math problems, certainly has contributed to that, right? Let's see where to go from here. There's so many things that I'd love. I wish I had about 5 hours with you, but we're getting down to it. So, what are some of the things that I would like to explore at this point? One thing that comes up for me, and I'm curious what this gets a little more down the woo-woo rabbit hole, but for me, something it's a story, my truth, that really helps to bring relief is this idea that, okay, there is no out there. It's all, I'm sort of a fractal of source consciousness, and I'm in my own private universe to some degree. Everything is a reflection in some way, shape, or form of me that I bump up against. In this case, you're a reflection of the consciousness of my consciousness that is playing the role of Charles Eisenstein and has this sort of view on the world and wisdom. And so for me, it brings a lot of comfort, this idea that, I'm in my own private universe, and, believing, and intuitively believing that there is all these potentialities, these different timelines where, we are in bubbles and experiencing everything through VR. But there's also versions of reality where the avatar that is Brandon Beecham goes, or my descendants can go into, where we heal the planet, and we're all sort of ships passing in the night. You may, let's say I bump up against someone today who's like, oh, we're all doomed. It's over. We already lost. That being goes into a timeline where that's what their experience is. Whereas if I'm very optimistic and, making these energetic choices within myself to, shift and contribute to the collective consciousness, that prayer, as you put it, actually has sort of an effect on the collective consciousness. Then, perhaps I step into the version of reality where we do sort of pull it out and create at least the best possible scenario from this moment forward. Obviously, we can't undo the past. So I'm curious, what your thought is on that view of reality and the way things unfold.
Yes. I look at it in a very similar way, that there are multiple timelines, each one of which lead to a different future, and they coexist right now. Mm-hmm. Kind of like in a quantum superposition of states. So, and not just future timelines, but present realities too, and past realities.
Right.
So whichever one we align ourselves to, we strengthen that timeline and that pathway from now to that future. We have to recognize that the entire menu of possible futures that is presented to us, each of those menu items corresponds to something within ourselves that is still alive and that is real. So the whatever the brownfields AI catastrophe concrete world future, that co-resonates with a state of being that is still alive in me, that I still occupy sometimes. And when I make choices from that place, I strengthen the field from which that future arises. I strengthen the timeline that that future is part of. And when I act from that part of myself that is aligned with Hippie Planet or one of the other beautiful futures, then I'm stepping into that timeline. And the choices that I make strengthen that timeline and contribute to that future.
Right.
So, again, I come back to, it's not just which do I choose, but it's also what are the conditions of my choice? When I am aligning with the negative timeline, what is hurting inside of me? Why am I doing that? Because I wouldn't willingly, consciously choose to create hell on earth. So just as like you wouldn't willingly, consciously choose to create hell in your intimate relationships, or but people do it all the time, or hell in their lives. So why? It's again like an addiction. Why are you drinking? Why are you taking drugs? Why are you addicted to porn? Why are you addicted to shopping or whatever it happens to be? Like, that's hurting you. So why are you doing it? And the prescription that you're just going to have to try harder and exercise more willpower to stop doing that, that is bad advice. Willpower does not work unless a deeper shift has happened or is happening. And then willpower can be useful to bring yourself along with this shift, to cut out a habit that is no longer aligned. Like, I'm not saying there's no use for it, but the inquiry has to be a lot deeper than just the lordly chooser, the lordly separate will choosing what future he's going to live in. It is a healing path to even be able to choose. Willpower, you can choose it temporarily, but the unacknowledged, unhealed wounds are going to erupt in some form, and you'll binge on negativity for a while. And it's like, I thought I got it, and then now why am I thinking all these negative thoughts and saying mean things and acting the victim and so on and so forth? I thought I was over that. I thought I got it, and I'm doing it again. It's because there's something that has not fully resolved or matured or been healed, and that needs attention. So that's just like maybe one subtlety I would add to what you were saying.
Yeah, and beautifully stated. And for me, I believe part of that healing involves, and you touched on it a moment ago, actually changing and choosing the past, or changing the story of the past. And for me, I feel like once you can rewrite the story of the past, like, okay, I was a victim when I was, 10 years old and this awful thing happened to me, to sort of maybe an expanded view of the story that, your challenges are blessings, your mess is ultimately going to become your message. That kind of idea, I think then takes this past story and takes it from one that's disempowering to a state that is empowering.
Yeah. Yeah, I could. Yeah.
So, one other thing that I'd like to just touch on as we start to wind down here is, one of your other books, Sacred Economics, you talk about, of course, another big piece of the puzzle, right? As we sort of rewrite the story of who we are and where we're going, changing this economic system. And I know that's sort of a deep hole, and I don't expect a super deep dive, but I am curious at a high level what you'd want to share with the audience about that. And I'm also curious what your thoughts are on, when you and I were sitting at Envision, early in early 2018, cryptocurrency was booming. You know, there was a lot of talks about cryptocurrency and how it's here, it's changing the world. And, you know, then there's been this sort of dip in the roller coaster since. And so I'd be curious, you know, what your thoughts are on both of those things.
Yeah. So that is a rather large rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But first, I'll say about sacred economics. Yeah, that book was kind of had two main themes. One was the change in the economic system. Like there was the systems level, how the system works and how it could change, what money could be, why money has the effects that it does in our world today. Why is it an agent of destruction when it's just a story? It's just a system of agreements that human beings have made. What is it about those agreements that make it so often into a force for harm? And what new agreements could we develop that embody a new story? So that's one of the themes. And then there's also the personal level, our psychological and spiritual buy-in to these stories and how that can change, how money inhabits our ways of thinking and seeing the world. And, you know, to some extent, we can liberate ourselves from the pernicious programs that money works in our psyche. I'm actually making an online course. By the time this comes out, it might be done. I'm not quite sure exactly, but on called Living in the Gift, which is about shifting into, it's not about living moneyless, but it's about seeing the world through eyes of gift and deprogramming from the nearly invisible programs of money, of scarcity, of ingratitude that are normal in our society. And like basically the most common question I get, how do I do what I love and still make a living?
That is the question.
That's the question. And there's no trivial answer to that. It's
right.
not about abundance affirmations. It's like I was saying before, you know, with these multiple levels of story and the state of being under the story, this is a profound question. So, yeah. Anyway, that's like maybe just a basic overview of sacred economics.
Okay.
And it was, like it would take me a long time to really go into it. And as for crypto, I was never an enthusiast. I never invested in it. I don't actually do investing. That's a whole other story. Part of the gift is non-accumulation. In gift cultures, people do not hoard. But
currency, right? You're letting it flow through.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wealth is a matter of generosity, not control.
Love that.
Anyway, so as far as crypto goes, I think that there is something there that a public ledger there's something really appealing about it. But it's not an escape from messy questions of politics and governance and agreement among human beings. You can't just export those functions onto an impersonal algorithm and think that the problem is going to be solved. So I could talk for like hours or maybe an hour on that topic. But yeah, it's not... I don't think that it's for money to really be a transformative force in our society. It has to embody the story of interbeing. It has to encourage and normalize and condition generosity, non-accumulation, non-hoarding, and the demonetization of society and the growth of the qualitative realm, the recovery of the qualitative realm. Most money is about quantifying. So I think that in a healed society, money will have a much smaller role than it has today.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's, and there are some people in the crypto world who I'm having this kind of conversation with, but it's very, very marginal. Mostly what it is a speculative instrument.
Right. Very, very interesting perspective. And that's like definitely going into my quote bucket. Wealth is a matter of generosity, not control. That's powerful truth. So one of the last things I'd like to ask you, and I normally kind of give people a heads up. So if you don't have something at the ready, I'll let you off the hook. But I love hearing stories of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story, anything that's kind of feel good and a little like, whoa, that's strange in the best kind of way. Do you have anything that comes to mind? I know you referenced at the top, when you went to Taiwan. And so I got the idea that there might be some of those stories wrapped up there. Anything good to share?
Yeah, I've had a number of stories like that. And like you, I kind of collect them too, because they affirm or confirm my feeling that reality is a lot more than I was told. Yeah, I remember one time this is many years ago, 15 years ago or something. I was in this love affair, and then I got cold feet, and boy, was she mad. She called me up and just let me have it, and not only did I, betray her heart, but I've not stood up to the plate of, and we are divine partners and soulmates, and I just don't have the courage to meet that possibility, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just like defenseless, and I hung up the phone, and this was at my office. I had like a kind of temporary office at Penn State University, and I was no one knew the number at that office. Like she was the only one who ever called me there. And I was sitting in that chair, so like devastated. I was paralyzed. Like I could not move. I just thought I was the scum of the earth. Like she made an airtight case that I was the scum of the earth, and I had no defense. And I just sat there for like probably an hour or two, like just glued to that chair, miserable, paralyzed. And then all of a sudden the phone rings. And I pick it up, and a woman's voice that I've never heard before or since doesn't even say hello. I say hello, and she says, "You're right, And I said, "I am?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Right about what?" But she's already hung up.
Wow.
So how did that, and that was exactly what I needed to hear. And my rational mind has no explanation for it. Maybe she told one of her friends about our conversation and gave her friend my office number, and what? That doesn't make sense. That.
Yeah, she probably wouldn't be saying you're right. I wouldn't think.
No, that's ridiculous. I mean, how would her friend have my number? That wasn't even listed anywhere. Or maybe it was a wrong number. Someone called up and thought she was talking to somebody else, and then realized that seems more plausible. But for that to have happened at that moment when I was completely helpless, in a death spiral.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it just it pulled you out of It pulled you out of that. What a powerful story. That reminds me of a story. I just pulled it up to see what number, going way back to episode 176 with Carlos Kukabura, where he had this powerful evening watching. What's the name of the movie? If you guys want to go back to episode 176, you can hear the story. It's a great one. And he's watching this movie, and it's all about losing. It's the moral of the story is this character character losing his ego, and he's in contact with his ego self, and he's a chess master, and he's playing lots of chess throughout the book, and it's like, you know, all at the end he sort of overcomes his ego, if I recall from the story. And so Carlos is watching this movie. It's having this profound effect on him, you know, getting the message from this movie about, and then same sort of thing. He had a landline that no one had the number to, nothing like that. He, all of a sudden his phone rings when he's in this elevated state of understanding himself better and his ego self better. And the phone rings, he goes and answers it, and he's like, and it's some stranger at like midnight. Is this the chess master? And then hangs up. Whoa. Then he goes into an elevated state of like, you know, this blissed out kind of state for days where all the synchronicities happening and people on the street, what they're talking about, speaking to what's in his head. And, you know, next thing you know, if he works at a movie theater, a few days later, the lead actor from that movie came into the theater, like, and he got to tell the story too. And it's just like, it was a wild one. Yeah. So that's what it makes me think of. Like, what was that, you know? Right. And it's so magical and beautiful.
And I think of stories like that every time that I start feeling despair about the fate of the planet. And I'm like, does my despair take into account that level of causality? Right.
There's something at work beyond what we're seeing. We've gotten glimpses here and there, and it definitely is reason for optimism from where I sit and view the world. You mentioned earlier thank you for sharing that story. That was a good one.
Let me just like one little addendum to it.
Please.
You know, after like that phone call happened, then I started to think, hold on here. Like, I was right. Like, gosh, she's pretty emotionally manipulative. And like this whole fairy tale about soulmates and stuff, like, why am I taking that on? And so you know, it wasn't like all of a sudden I could make excuses for myself. It just clued me in that there was another story here.
Yes. That's powerful stuff right there. So you mentioned that you have a course or courses, and I noticed, and I really love this because this is something that I do as well. You know, when I started this podcast years ago, I had a couple product shirts and a bracelet and things like that. And I actually did this similar thing where it's like, hey, I want this to be like this bracelet to be a reminder just to, you know, keep a positive head, kind of a fun thing. It's made from recycled materials. Name your price, right? And I noticed that you do a similar thing with your courses. And I thought you're really walking the talk with your ideas on economics. And so, you know, as far as your statement, you don't know if the course that you referenced will still be available. This will come out in about a week and a half, a week from Wednesday. So I don't know if there's any other courses or anything that you want to talk about.
It's not that it won't still be available. It's that I haven't finished making it yet.
Gotcha. I see.
But yes, they are all, I offer them all, everything I do, I offer as gift, which means no paywall. And, you know, if people want to support me, my work, et cetera, then for the course, for example, they choose the price that feels right and clear and honest, and a good expression of their feeling of gratitude and value. Like they choose, it could be zero.
Yep.
Probably at least half the people choose zero. So don't be ashamed if that's what you choose, but that's the way it feels good to me to do it.
I love that. I definitely resonate with that. So you have obviously a course that's forthcoming. What is the best way for people to connect that want to follow your work, that want to, you know, see and know about this course and forthcoming and others that you may have in the future?
Well, probably just go to my website, which is Charles Eisenstein .something net or org or something. Yeah.
.something. I love it that you don't know exactly what it is. That is somehow perfect. I'll look it up.
We're revamping the website. So I think it was .net, and I think we might make it .org now. I don't know. Anyway, they'll all go to the same place.
One of them.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. So that's the best way for people to connect. And next thing that kind of bubbles up for me is what's next for you? You have a great library of books. Is there something else that's brewing or any other projects that you're excited about that you'd care to just give us a glimpse into?
Well, I mean, aside from putting out more, audio and video, just by, for example, doing things like this, I've got some people working with me because I've got like all this material that's languishing in various corners of the internet, and so we're making more, other things out of it. And also, I'm kind of maybe writing a children's book.
Ooh,
yeah,
I like that. Very interesting. Do you care to share what the content will be?
Well, I have 4 sons, and the youngest is 5 now.
I met your son, by the way. I just want to throw that out there because I'm glad that you mentioned him, because your son is the same age as my son that was at the Superhero Academy. And, I don't know if you remember that first night we got paired up with someone where we did like an eye gazing moment, and I was paired with your son, and I hadn't even met him before that moment, and it was just it was such a powerful experience. Like you just really get to see into the beauty of someone's soul when you have that sort of experience and share that experience together. And it was great because I really didn't bump up against him the rest of the time. We didn't speak after that. It was like that was part of an exercise we were doing collectively. And then literally an hour before I was going to jump on the plane to leave, I connected with him and had 15, 20 minutes with him. So I just wanted to throw that out there because he is beautiful, and it was such a wonderful part of my experience.
Yeah, he's a beautiful soul.
Definitely.
But anyway, through parenting for children, I've become very, very unhappy with the state of children's literature, especially for 3 to 7-year-olds, picture books and stuff with all the stupid anthropomorphized animals who are basically just humans with animal heads, and the heavy moralizing, or just like the plain silliness, or the dumbed down language, and you, so I'm like, okay, let's do this right. And so that's what I've been telling bedtime stories to my youngest son, and some of them I'm like, oh yeah, that one's a keeper. And so I'm putting some of those together.
Cool. What a great and unique new trajectory for you. So I definitely like that idea. One of my, I often say one of my favorite books, period, is a children's book called The Little Soul in the Sun. Have you ever heard of it? By Neil Donald Walsh. I highly recommend it. It's definitely on the advanced side for children to read, and it just sort of, Neil Donald Walsh, who did the books, you may be familiar with, Conversations with God. And I just love his, the story that basically says, hey, here's who we are. Here's what we are in the form of the story, and it's really, really a powerful one. I recommend it to adults, kids, anyone. Definitely might be one you might be interested in checking out as you sort of go down that path.
All right. Well, thanks for the suggestion.
Yeah. Well, Charles, this has been everything I'd hoped it would be. You are truly an inspiration. I do have one final question I'd like to leave you with. Okay. It's my same outro question my predictable question is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Charles Eisenstein?
I don't know what the meaning of life is. I just don't know. I guess I'm here to find that out. And if I did know, I wouldn't tell you. Let's put it that way.
That's a great answer. Good answer. It definitely makes all the sense in the world. I love it. Thank you, Charles, for being. You are, like I said, such an inspiration, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and we'll have to perhaps circle back around at some point and dig deeper into some of the other fascinating topics like sacred economics or any other things that are sort of bubbling up at the time. So thank you for taking this journey with me.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. It was really fun.
Likewise. Until next time, journey well, my friend.
Thanks.
Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes. Since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting, your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.